This is the audio on some notes on the practice of mindfulness of the body. I'll read a paragraph or so that is relevant based on Venerable Arya Vangsa's translations that the Ayagata Sati. So Digha Nikaya 34, there's a bit that says, which is the one thing that should be developed? And then the Buddha answers, mindfulness of the body endowed with pleasure. This is the one thing that should be developed. Then further in Majjhima Nikaya 119, the Buddha goes on talking about the mindfulness of the body in relation to the mindfulness of breathing. So it goes like this, and bhikkhus, developed in what way, made much of, in what way, is mindfulness of the body of much fruit, of much benefit. Here, because a bhikkhu gone to the forest, or gone to the root of a tree, or gone to an empty hut, sits down, having crossed his legs, with the intention of a straight back, having set up mindfulness in front. That's the important bit, mindfulness in front. Quite mindfully, he breathes in, quite mindfully, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands I'm breathing in long. Breathing out long, he understands I'm breathing out long. So this is the bit that I wanted to mention, a few points. It's he understands. Based on the other talks that we gave on peripheral awareness, or awareness, done properly, pretty much, I wanted to point out here that when it says here, breathing in long, he understands that he's breathing in long. That is not something that he attends. That is something that he knows. So what he attends, it's what's in front. And that's exactly what I said, why this is important beforehand, when I said mindfulness, he sets up his mindfulness in front. Means he surmounts his experience as a whole, puts it in front, so to speak. He attends to that. And while that thing is enduring, and in this case that thing is breathing, he knows what is enduring without having to attend it. As it was mentioned in the essay that I wrote, also called Peripheral Awareness, people can find it on our website. The knowledge is always peripheral. That's how it works. Even if you attend to it, you attend to the particular exemplification of that. But arriving at the knowledge, arriving in the insight, arriving in the understanding of nature of things, that's done at the background of whatever you're attending. In other words, you cannot, through your pure attention and pure observation and pure perception, arrive at knowledge. Knowledge is developed when you understand the nature of what you're perceiving, attending, and so on. So that's why that's how mindfulness is done. That's why as we've done in other talks, explained peripheral awareness based on the practice of mindfulness of the body, the referencing, anchoring, no matter how you translate it. The point is you establish your mind on the peripheral image while you're attending something else. So you learn how to not try to attend that which you're supposed to understand, but instead discern it in regard to whatever you set up in front of you as your practice. And in this case, and also it's important to know that in this case, it's a person needs to be physically secluded. You can't do this practice surrounded by the people, no matter how quiet and silent they are. You need actual physical seclusion, physically removed from the presence of another. A phenomenon of another needs to be absent in your experience. You need to be alone. That's why gone to the root of a tree, a forest, an empty hut. It's not just for the romantic value. Once you are in such a seclusion, you sit down, you set up mindfulness to the fore. There is no more specific instruction. Oh, you watch the tip of your nostril. And no, you bring the mindfulness to forward. And what you bring mindfulness, of what mindfulness forward is brought, it's basically of your experience as a whole. Experience of breathing. That's what you're doing. I'm sitting down and I'm breathing. And you can say you attend to that, just in that general manner. And then while you're doing it, you keep a corner of your eye, so to speak, to the knowledge of what you are doing. Hence, it's quite pointed and stressed out here. Breathing in long, he understands I am breathing in long. He doesn't have to stop breathing or stop attending mindfulness to the four that he has brought, the attention to the four in front of him, in order to understand that he's breathing. He simply understands that which he's doing. And he understands it by not trying to attend the nature of what he's doing, but by discerning it. And that's the entire point I'm making here. So breathing in long, he understands he's breathing long. Breathing out long, he understands he's breathing out long. Breathing in short, he understands I am breathing in short. Breathing out short, he understands. Means for any aspect, he doesn't mean that he has to catch, I'm in, out, in, out. It means that at any point of the duration of in and out breath, he understands the nature of it. So this is the way to describe it, that he's fully aware, without attending it directly. Because what he attends directly is that which he has put in front, which is not the understanding of what he's doing in front. So then that's how he then starts on that peripheral level, including the phenomenon of this whole body that he did put in the front initially. So he trains thus, I will breathe out experiencing the whole body. He trains thus, I will breathe out calming the bodily determinations, the bodily sankhara. And again, nature of sankhara, it's always that upon which something else depends on. In other words, nature of sankhara is always to be in the background. The best example of this is the dependence of Namarupa and Vijnana and Namarupa, as the Buddha described it. So if you look at Namarupa, it's determined by Vijnana. If you look at Vijnana, it's determined by Namarupa, which means determination, sankhara, is always opposite of where you look. In other words, you cannot see it directly. You cannot see it with your attention, with your intention, because they're already determined. So the point is to recognize, to start developing this indirect vision of peripheral, or indirect vision of proper mindfulness. The only reason I'm insisting on this description of peripheral is because of the many misconceptions today. People do their mindfulness by attending moment to moment to moment to moment. There's absolutely no understanding, no awareness of intentionality developed behind, yet it's actually implicit even in those misguided acts. So he trains in a way that he will, while he's breathing in, he will be steadying these peripheral body as a determination. And that means exactly that. The body that you eventually learn to discern on the peripheral level, without needing to directly look at it and start feeling and touching and getting your sensations going and so on, which is usually how people practice meditation, observing sensation in this body right in front of me. No, you want to discern the body on the peripheral level, because that's that body, because of which you are able to observe all these sensations and whatnot right in front of you. And that's why it's said in that Anapanasati Sutta, that many translators and scholars get confused over how to translate it, when it says, that is body among bodies. That phenomena stands basically for what your body is at that present time. There is no other body. So that body of breath they're trying to translate, or maybe means this, means body, means exactly that. Means body discerned peripherally, not body attended directly. And there's a fundamental difference. One of them is object of your attention, the other one is sankhara of your experience as a whole. And it is that sankhara of the experience as a whole that the Buddha talks about as the value of single mindfulness that you need to develop, that will result in basically full liberation and supernatural powers or whatever else, if there is an opening for that, of course. So that's exactly what this points out. He trains in a way that he will breathe in, discerning these bodily determinations. not looking at the body, not chasing sensations, but discerning that peripheral, remote, ambiguous image of the body there. And that's also what it says in Satipatthana Sutta. I mentioned that in other talks, that where the Buddha says he practices mindfulness of the body internally, externally, and so on, or he discerns, or he practices mindfulness to the extent necessary for the final knowledge, in relation to he knows the body is there. So he develops mindfulness of the knowledge the body is there to the extent necessary for final knowledge, and that's it. And it's that body there is that peripheral image of the body, which if you attend directly, it just becomes an abstract thought. But if you see it with proper mindfulness, with indirectly, without needing to attend it, then actually it stands for a phenomenon which is a determination of your body that you can know right here in front of you, that you can see, touch, perceive, and so on. So then this passage goes on and saying, for one dwelling in this way, vigilant, ardent, resolute, any memories and thoughts connected with home are abandoned. With abandoning of these internally, and by the way, internally is also something that can almost always. There are some exceptions though, but that would be a digression here. So, but internally can almost always be used to describe that peripheral, that which you cannot directly attend. What you attend becomes external, pretty much, even if it's internal things. But anyway, let's not get into that here. So, with the abandoning of these internally, the mind stands still. By discerning these internally, it means by surmounting them internally, you abandon them internally. The mind stands still, settles down, it is unified, it is composed. Unification, composure, all result of proper mindfulness. Peripheral anchoring, call it whichever way. So in this way, because a bhikkhu develops mindfulness of the body. So next page. Then he goes on. Furthermore, a bhikkhu walking understands I'm walking. Again, while bhikkhu is walking, he's aware of the significance, peripheral significance of his actual act of walking. Hence, he understands he's walking. He's not telling to himself, walking, walking, touching, touching, moving, moving, feeling, feeling. He doesn't need to, because all of those actions are possible to do on the peripheral level in the first place, because the significance, all those actions are possible to do on the actual level, as in you can attend to them, you can do it like this or like that, because on the peripheral level, a context, the significance of them is already present and remains present. For as long as you're doing it, it endures. So he understands he's walking, or if he's standing, he understands that he's standing. If he's sitting down, he understands that he's sitting down. And again, understanding sitting down means knowing to sit down. It doesn't mean attending the act of sitting down. Only person who is not free from doubt would be needing to attend something to keep knowing that he is doing it, but that's not knowledge, and knowledge won't arise from it. That's what I would be describing as a mechanical technique or a method. And it's mechanical because there's this assumed, almost like a blind faith. So as long as I keep looking, keep catching these moments, it will reveal the truth. But the truth is in the knowledge. That's why the Buddha talks about it all the time. Or if he's lying down, he understands he's lying down. Or in whatever way his body is disposed, he understands this. For one dwelling in this way, vigilant, ardent, resolute, memories of and thoughts connected with home are abandoned. And so on. Then he goes on, bhikkhu going forward, going backward, he acts with awareness. Again, awareness results in the understanding of the peripheral, because awareness in itself, if properly anchored, is in relation, it's anchored in the peripheral in relation to the actual. Awareness is being basically discerning the relationship between intention, significance, and that which you're attending and signifying through your acts. Looking forward, looking back, he's one who acts with awareness. Bending, stretching, he's the one who acts with awareness. taking his sangati, bowl and robe, he's the one who acts with awareness. Eating, drinking, consuming, tasting, he's the one who acts with awareness. Walking, standing, sitting down, sleeping, walking, speaking, being silent, he's the one who acts with awareness. For one dwelling in this way, vigilant, ardent, resolute, any memories and thoughts connected with home are abandoned. With abandoning of these internally, the mind stands still, settles down, it's unified, it's composed. In this way too, because the bhikkhu develops mindfulness of the body. And then goes on the same description, same passage, just changes. Attending to the repulsive, he attends to it with awareness. Attending to the elements, attending to 9 cemetery contemplation. And you could see what's in common to these things. It's common that they're being attended. While attended, he's aware of them. He understands them. He doesn't say he attends to his understanding of this thing that he attends. And yes, the word for attending here is manasikara. So that's exactly what we're talking about in peripheral awareness and what I've been talking about here so far. So attending to the repulsive, he's the one who does that with awareness. Awareness and attention are not the same. You could think of, if you struggle understanding this, you could think of awareness being the background of what you're attending, which means if you try to attend that background, well, that's what you're attending, which means your awareness is the background of that. Same, again, and you can attend that which you perceive, obviously. So attending to repulsive, attend 9 cemetery contemplations, attending to the perception of elements, obviously. So, and then goes on describing the same thing, how to develop jhanas, again, according to following the same principle. Furthermore, because a bhikkhu, quite secluded from sense desires, dwells, having entered upon the first jhana. He makes this very body flow with joy and pleasure born of seclusion, the image of the body that has been discerned through right awareness, or has been discerned peripherally. He fills it up, he fully pervades it. If you rightly discern and pervade that peripheral body, you're gonna feel it actually, because that is that body. As Nyanamoli would say, it's doubly present. So he makes it flow all around, he fills it up, he fully pervades it, so that for him there isn't anything in the entire body which hasn't been pervaded with joy, pleasure, and born seclusion. Then gives the simile of the barber. Then goes to the first, second, third, fourth jhana. Pretty much will deal the same principle, just replacing one thing with the other, refining, so to speak, but following the same peripheral principle. That's like, is there beyond? When Sariputta says in Majjhima Nikaya 109, is there beyond? Is there more than this? By discerning the same principle, is there beyond? Is there more than this? By discerning the same principle, you could see, can you go further? And that's how he would go to the next attainment, and confirm that there is more than that. And yeah, that's another thing to point out here. So through mindfulness of the body, you develop jhana. Or through attending to all these cemetery perceptions and so on, understanding what you're attending, understanding the nature of what you're attending, you establish your mind and withdraw from sensuality and pervade your body with pleasure peripherally, which then becomes your jhana. So the reason I'm mentioning that is because there is obviously the most common notion, perception of Buddhist meditation is you watch your nostrils, you have the experience, that's your jhana. But there's absolutely no mention of that whatsoever. Jhanas, sure, you can develop jhanas on account of anapanasati. And anapanasati is how we started describing this. Understanding your breathing, not attending to the perception of the air passing through your nostrils that results in your jhana. When that understanding becomes established, unwavering, that's your jhana. And that's exactly why here it goes on, lists all this mindfulness of the body, and then says jhanas come out of it. No mention of any tip of the nose or the bottom of your belly and so on. So let me just find, I think there's some other interesting passages that are slightly different, but along the same principle. Yeah, this one says, bhikkhus, says, because for whoever mindfulness of the body is developed, made much of, wherever he directs his mind to the realization by discernment of things that can be realized by discernment, right there, if there is an opening, he attains the ability to witness it for himself. Imagine bhikkhus a water jug placed in a basin full to the brim with water which crows could drink. Whenever a strong man would draw water, would water come? Yes, Bhante. In just this way, bhikkhus, for whoever mindfulness of the body is developed, again, not a special access concentration, and I don't even know terminology anymore, I stopped following it, but not a specific, almost mystical technique, but mindfulness of the body. For whoever mindfulness of the body is developed, he gets to witness these discernment of things. He gets to, if there is an opening, develop even supernatural powers. And that's actually the passage I'm trying to find here now. But before I get to it, I can just carry on. So the bhikkhus with mindfulness of the body frequently develop, made much of, made habit of, made basis of, practiced, made familiar, thoroughly undertaken. The first benefit is there is enduring of non-delight and delight. But he does not endure this non-delight. He dwells having overcome arisen non-delight. There is an enduring fear and dread, but he does not endure this fear and dread. He dwells having overcome arisen fear and dread. This is actually a very good translation. Slightly subtle, so let me point that out. There is the enduring fear and dread, which means fear and dread have arisen on their own, independently of you. They have manifested because that's the nature of phenomena, of dhammas, to manifest. Once manifested, they endure. That is their persisting while changing, the literal translation of the Pali term. So there is the enduring fear and dread. But the man who is developed, a monk who is developed mindfulness of the body, he does not endure that. He doesn't own that endurance. That endurance does not affect him, does not pertain to him. It's not his problem. Thus, he doesn't endure the endurance of fear and dread, the endurance of non-delight, the endurance of discomfort, the endurance of hardship, slander, gossip, piercing, evil, displeasing words, disagreeable insults, all of that. All those things arise, they endure on their own. Having endured, they have ceased. Having endured, they have ceased. But the monk who has developed the mindfulness of the body, he does not endure it. He dwells in the body, having overcome the arisen fear and dread. There is patience towards cold, heat, hunger, thirst, contact with flies, mosquitoes, wind, heat, creepy crawlies. Oh, that's an interesting. There is endurance towards bad speech, unwholesome ways of speaking. There is arisen feelings in the body that are painful, sharp, rough, severe, disagreeable, displeasing, taking away life. And then carries on, the one who develops mindfulness of the body, makes much of it, properly discerns the phenomenon of the body there, peripherally. He is the one who obtains at will, without trouble, without difficulty, the 4 jhanas of the higher mind, pleasant dwellings here and now, based on understanding of the nature of the body, not based on a meditation, contemporary meditation technique. He experiences the various kinds of powers. Again, all of this is based on the mindfulness of the body. Like extending your arms, sitting down, talking, not trying to attend to it, but actually understanding the nature of it. He experienced the various kinds of powers. Having been one, he is many. Having been many, he is one. He exerts control over his body as far as the Brahma world. With the divine ear element, which is clarified and surmounts the human, he hears sounds both divine and human, whether far or near. He understands the minds of other beings, of other individuals, having encompassed them by mind. He understands a mind with passion as mind with passion. He understands mind free from passion as mind free from passion. A mind with ill will as mind free from ill will. A mind with delusion, a mind free from delusion. So he understands all of this. He discerns it. He understands unliberated mind as unliberated, liberated as liberated. 8th benefit is he recollects various former lives, that is, one birth, two births. With such a reason, with such an explanation, he recollects various kinds of former lives. Why? Because even the memory, that's how memory works. It's the extent of the peripheral, extent of non-direct. So you get reminded through attending to something, gets you remind you peripherally. So if you develop the mind in regard to the mindfulness peripherally, it can go as far as to start remembering previous lives. What was before these perceptions, before the perception of this life that unifies all these particular perceptions. Because again, it's the same relationship, same principle. The 9th benefit is with the divine I element, which is clarified and surmounts the human, he sees beings passing away, reappearing, inferior, excellent, beautiful, ugly, good destination, bad destination. He understands that beings go according to their actions. And the 10th benefit is having realized for himself by recognizing here and now the liberation of the mind, liberation of understanding, he dwells having entered upon the destruction of the outflows which is without outflows. So bhikkhus with mindfulness of the body frequently develop, made much of, made a habit of, made a basis of, practiced, made familiar, thoroughly undertaken, understood. These are the 10 benefits to be expected. Okay, well, let me. I can read I haven't read these passages now, the next ones, but you just go ahead. I can read it, and we'll see if I have something to say about it. Anyway, I'm sure they're interesting. So this is Anguttara Nikaya now. I think Book of Ones, 575 to 627. So various verses from 563 and so on. So one thing bhikkhus developed, made much of, leads to great existential angst, leading to great benefit, leads to great safety from bondage, leads to mindfulness and awareness, leads to attainment of knowing and seeing, leads to pleasant dwelling in this very life, leads to realization of the fruit of wisdom and liberation. Which one thing? It's the mindfulness of the body. This one thing, because developed, made much of, leads to great existential anxiety, leads to great benefit, leads to great safety from bondage, leads to mindfulness and awareness, leads to attainment of knowing and seeing, leads to pleasant dwelling in this very life, leads to liberation. Well, I'm sure that whoever listens to this would want to know, how does that make sense? That it leads to great existential anxiety, then leads to great benefit. Actually, it's a very good translation, again. That's why I chose Venerable Arivansa papers that I got. Yeah. Samvega, Samvatati, Bahulika, yeah. So, well, it leads to existential anxiety because that's the first step, basically. That's the first step to liberation. You could say that, acknowledging the existential anxiety. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can find any sutta that the Buddha talks about a young man realizing that he's subject to suffering and so on. And there is always a line where he says he realizes that he's prey to suffering. So if you, like, that's obviously, that's something that everybody would often read over. Oh yeah, prey to suffering, sure. But if you stop and think about it, reflect on how would you feel if you're being hunted, not by this person or that, but by nature of suffering. How would you feel if you recognize that your human situation can be pounced upon by any suffering from any direction and you can't even foresee it, let alone do something about it? So imagine if you're in the middle of the wilderness, there is a wild beast there that can kill you, and you can't see it, you can't hear it. You can only know, you start knowing, you start basically recognizing that you are its prey, that it can jump on you at any time, and that's it. It will, if it doesn't kill you, it will harm you. And eventually, of course, you will die. So, and how would you feel? You'd be like full of dread and anxiety, overwhelming one as well. And the Buddha would always say that would be like a prerequisite for a young man to leave the household life and go and seek the truth. But again, people would often read over it because, yeah, I mean, it's just, okay, prey to suffering, sure, yeah, we're all subject to suffering. But no, you actually have to acknowledge it and feel it. He feels he's prey to suffering. He feels suffering is that hunter. And yeah, that's not subject to feeling suffering is something you cannot even conceive. How would you prevent it? No amount of effort actually can make any difference fundamentally, even if you live completely sheltered life, because suffering arises internally. Any of your efforts are efforts directed towards the external. So that's exactly how, if you start being mindful of your body, you start being mindful of the perilous situation of being a living human, subjected to elements, accidents, will of others, things out of your control. All of those are basis for anxiety. So, you start practicing mindfulness correctly. You start discerning the notion of the body, your body being there in the world. You start discerning that peripheral. You start understanding it. You're gonna be filled with existential anxiety, and that's just inevitable. Now, how much you're gonna suffer on account of that existential anxiety? Well, that's determined on how much of your mind has been developed. How much of your mind, well, basically how much pain you can take. I remember reading that a long time ago. It was a Bhikkhu Jnana Jivaku, the Yugoslavian monk, who's obviously was the whose books inspired me towards the Theravada, and even he kind of understood this. I mean, he was often sort of pro contemporary approach, but he was a philosopher beforehand, so there's only so much that he was able to ignore. So he understood that he said in one of his books that the type of suffering that is necessary to acknowledge and start to feel in order to practice the Buddha's teaching correctly is the type of suffering that for most people would probably result in some form of mental derangement, neurosis, psychosis, or something. As in, they won't be able to handle it. So you have to be able to handle it. If you can't handle existential anxiety without breaking down, without sort of doing something uncontrollable, you won't be able to then develop it further into liberation. That's why people, when they would, back in the day, when the Buddha would describe what Nibbana is, they would freak out, fall on the ground, start ripping their hair out. That's a genuine description of a terror, because for them, Nibbana is death. So for Putujana, Nibbana is death, basically. Or what he thinks death is, basically. So, well, to add here, in order to be able to deal with existential anxiety, you have to be established in virtue. So the reason why people don't have enough mental strength to cope with their arisen existential dread and existential anxiety is because their behavior hasn't been purified beforehand, as the Buddha would say. So for somebody who's starting taking their virtue seriously, their precepts seriously, their restraint seriously, watching the speech, practicing non-harm, non-ill will, and definitely non-sensuality, that is how you develop the mind so it can take the pain. Any principle of strength. You develop strength by exposing your weakness, by challenging it bit by bit by bit, and the mind adapts, the body adapts. That's how you become stronger. So if the virtue has been developed beforehand, mindfulness of the body will reveal the great existential anxiety, mahato samvegaya samvatati. It will reveal the great existential anxiety that you will be able to hold. And if you are able to hold it, then that mindfulness of the body leads to the next thing, which is the great benefit, great safety from bondage. Leads to mindfulness and awareness, leads to attainment of knowledge, to pleasant dwelling in this very life, to freedom, to arahantship. But not if you ignore it. Not if you ignore the existential anxiety. So yeah, that is indeed an interesting sutta, although I'm sure if you find other English translations, they're going to be very different. But that's just the nature of the suttas. They're so general, so condensed in their meaning, that even if you read pure Pali, you're going to be putting your own views. So you want to be honest, and you want to look for a context of your understanding that can then remain unchanged regardless of the sutta you're reading. You want to basically start discerning the nature, the principles, that then no amount of sutta, or rather if it's challenged by different suttas, means it's not adequate principle. You can't just having a patchwork and just patching it as it arises, modifying it. You want one sutta to represent the whole suttas. Insight into the nature of one sutta means you are able to understand all the other suttas if you pay attention, if you read them, if you sort of discern them. And that's, from that point of view, it will also become clear how it is possible to how it was possible to become an arahant simply by one discourse by the Buddha, or even part of it. Yeah, because one contains the whole nature, the whole universal principle of the Dhamma. And again, that's what the Buddha said himself. So I think that should probably be enough for now. There are quite a few more passages, but I could perhaps do a part 2 or 3, because I think even this is more than enough for people to follow.